Yo, what up, homies? Yanarigo GD here, and after the immense support on the video ranking the hardest Persona trophies, it's clear to me that the love for trophies is still here, so I wanted to make a video just like that one for the Metal Gear series. In case you missed the last video, I chose the hardest trophy in each game and ranked them from easiest to the hardest, and that's what we'll be doing today for Metal Gear. The Metal Gear series is overall a lot harder than Persona, so this list was quite difficult to make, so if you disagree with anything I said, then feel free to drop a comment. Something special I'll do for this video though is rank both the Master Collection and HD Collection versions as if they're separate games, since they have different trophy lists, so this nearly doubles the size of the rankings. It actually makes it come out to about 11 games, which is the same as the Persona list, so that's pretty ironic. I think this opens up a lot of interesting discussion, so it should be a good time. Before we get into the list though, I just want to ask very quickly that you like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot and I'll love you forever. Alright, let's get started. Starting with the easiest trophy of the video is the Zanzibar Land Survivor trophy from the Metal Gear 1 and 2 trophy list. This trophy asks you to beat the boss survival mode in Metal Gear 2, and that really isn't too hard. If you can beat the game, then you can pretty easily beat the boss survival. It takes like 10 minutes to beat all the bosses, and if you die, then it doesn't really matter since it takes such a short amount of time and there's no prerequisites for starting this mode. You can also choose the easy difficulty, which makes it even easier as you would expect. This is by far and away the easiest platinum in the series, but it only gets harder with the next game, that being the King of the Jungle trophy in the HD Collection version of Metal Gear Solid 3. This trophy asks you to collect every snake, bird, fruit, mushroom, fish, frog, and anything else that Snake can obtain and consume throughout the game. This trophy, while not too hard, is way harder than the Zanzibar Land Survivor trophy, and it sets up the mood for the rest of the games on the list. Obtaining all of these creatures and whatnot means you got a shit ton of things to keep track of. Thankfully, you can do this on whatever difficulty you want, but unless you use a guide or go out of your way to extensively search every area, then this trophy can be a bit of a pain in the ass. Things like the infamous Sushinoko are hard to find unless you know the specific areas and strategies to get them, and if you miss an item, then you're basically screwed and you're going to need to either reload a save or restart the game. It's manageable and not very demanding of the player, but it's still pretty tricky in some regards, and that's why it's low but not the lowest. Next up on the list in a pretty decent difficulty spike is the Elite Trophy in the Master Collection version of Metal Gear Solid 1. This trophy asks you to receive the Fox or Big Boss rank, which can be obtained by beating the game on hard or extreme with 80 saves or less, 0 continues, 4 alerts or less, 25 enemies killed or less, and 1 or fewer rations used. Now if you're familiar with the other max ranks in the series, you'll recognize that one major stipulation is omitted from this, and that's the fact that there are no restrictions against using special items. The special items make this trophy a complete cakewalk. You can use the Stealth Camouflage and Infinity Bandana and cheese the entire run no problem. Stealth Camo makes you undetectable by enemies, and the Infinity Bandana gives you infinite ammo. Even if you only have one or the other, it still makes the run significantly easier. Another way to make this trophy even easier is to play on the Japanese version of the game. If you play on this version, the game will be set to easy by default with no way to change it, so you can get the ranks on easy instead of hard or extreme. The 80 saves in particular makes this trophy a cakewalk, to be honest. I mean, who the hell is going to save more than that? You can save scum the hell out of the game, which is why I think it's one of the easier trophies on this list. The trophy at the number 8 spot might be a bit controversial, but in my opinion it's the Unlocked trophy from Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes. This trophy isn't terribly hard, but it's one of the most annoying on this list easily because the description is just so damn vague for no reason. This trophy asks you to unlock all the trials. Simple enough, but how the hell do you unlock them and what are they? The game does not outright tell you, so you have to figure it out. I had to look this trophy up to refresh my memory and I forgot how dumb it was. So first, I have to tell you about a certain mechanic. In Metal Gear Solid 5, you have the ability to scan enemies with your binoculars to mark them on the map and keep track of where they are. It's a very useful ability, and it just so happens to be the main part of unlocking this trophy. On the normal difficulty of every mission in the game, you have to scan every enemy in the map. Then you need to beat every mission on hard twice. Now that's it, but why the hell is there no indication of what every trial is? I mean, for all I know, there could be a trial for twerking on top of pods 100 times in a row. Even though the trophy isn't that hard, it's just stupid. Regardless of my frustration with that, it still deserves its spot because it can be troublesome to fulfill all the requirements, but it's not as hard as the rest of the trophies on the list. Going into a trophy that is probably going to stir up some discussion for sure for being kind of low is the Executed trophy from Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. This trophy asks you to complete all of the mission tasks for every mission. Now listen, if you want to argue it should be higher, then I can kind of understand because this trophy is pretty hard and it does take a long time, but hear me out. All of the mission tasks can be completed one by one in different attempts. They don't have to be in a single run of the mission. So even though this will take a lot longer, it really isn't that hard to do each one individually. Some of the mission tasks involve things like not entering reflex mode, avoiding alert, and many other mission specific things. It basically wants you to do every mission as sufficiently as possible and do any unique interactions that are possible. Again, it's pretty hard, but the sheer fact that you can do them one by one is why it's a bit lower on the list. But if you want to argue it's higher, then feel free. I'm just explaining my reasoning. The 6th trophy on this list and beyond is when things start picking up on difficulty fast, and this is the Foxhound trophy from the Master Collection version of Metal Gear Solid 3. This trophy asks you to obtain the Foxhound rank, and to do so you need to beat the game on extreme difficulty or higher in under 5 hours with 0 alerts, 0 kills, 0 continues, less than 25 saves, no special items, no life medicine, and take less than 10 health bars of damage. Like I mentioned in the MGS1 section, the special items make the game a cakewalk, so the fact this game disallows the use of them cranks up the difficulty a lot. Not to mention the fact that there's overall more restrictions than MGS1 in general. MGS3 isn't terribly difficult because there are mechanics you can make use of, like the camo system to make yourself harder to see, and there are some items you can use in New Game Plus that don't actually count as special items like the boss camos, but it's still hard. In my opinion, the hardest part of the game is trying to manage your suppressor on the train gun. Since you can't kill anyone, you're going to be relying on non-lethal methods to dispatch enemies, and the suppressor makes it a lot easier. If you shoot the train gun without the suppressor, it's quite likely an alert phase will be triggered in my experience. You need to shoot the gun sparingly and find as many suppressors as you can. While this rank is pretty hard to get, I think it's one of the most fun ranks to get in the series. It's hard and sets some good restrictions, but it isn't overdone. Now if we want to talk about ranks that are stupid, allow me to transition into the trophy at the number 5 spot, and this is the Sounds of the Battlefield trophy in Metal Gear Solid 4. This trophy might not be the hardest on the list, but it's by far the most overkill, mind-numbing trophy in all of Metal Gear. This trophy asks you to collect all of the iPod tracks in the game. And you might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound that hard, but let me just say, some of the things you need to do to get these iPod tracks are outrageous. So you can collect songs by picking them up around the game, holding up soldiers, and getting every emblem in the game, which are the ranks you get at the end. There are 40 ranks in total, and even though you can collect a lot of them in the same playthrough, it still takes a minimum of 7 entire playthroughs, and some of these emblems are pure bullshit. One of them is the infamous chicken emblem. To get this emblem, you need 150 alerts, 500 kills, 50 continues, 50 healing items, and take longer than 35 hours to beat the game. Yes, 35 hours. On the opposite side of the spectrum is the Big Boss rank, which requires you to beat the game on the boss extreme difficulty while getting 0 alerts, 0 kills, 0 continues, 0 healing items, and beating the game in under 5 hours. This is probably the second easiest Big Boss rank in the series since there weren't any save restrictions, but it's still pretty hard. Then there are emblems that require the following: landing 150 headshots, crawling on the ground for an hour, sticking to walls for an hour, getting all weapons in one playthrough, hiding in a cardboard box for 1 hour, roll 100 times, spend 2.5 hours crouching, get praised by rebels 25 times, give rebels 50 items, use scanning plug or syringe on 50 enemies, CQC choke to kill 100 enemies, defeat 50 enemies with a knife, get 10 combat highs, hold up 50 enemies, brisk 50 enemies, and probably more. You basically have to do damn near everything you can possibly think of to get all the emblems for this trophy, and it takes forever. The amount of monotonous grinding needed for this platinum puts even other PS3 games of its time to shame, and that's why it's comfortably at the number 5 spot. I wouldn't put it any higher, but it's a big pain in the ass for sure. Now going into the next trophy, we stray away from bullshit grinding, but steer right into genuine difficulty and skill requirements. The 4th hardest trophy on this list is the Big Boss trophy in Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and this trophy asks you to clear all of the main and extra ops with an S rank. This is a somewhat similar story to the Phantom Pain, but harder in basically every way. You can choose each mission separately and work on them one at a time, but since the only thing that matters is the rank at the end, if you don't get the S, then you have no choice but to do it all over again. There is no half credit or small progress like the mission tasks in 5, and the game is overall significantly harder than 5 in my opinion. Some missions are actually really damn hard to get an S rank on. To get an S rank, you basically need to complete all the missions under a set time with 0 kills and 0 alerts. Some missions may have special stipulations, but those are the main requirements that will help you get to the S ranks. Something that is a bit of a saving grace with this trophy though is the co-op system of the game. You can play the game with a friend and it'll make it a lot easier overall. It isn't required of course, but it is an option. There isn't too much to go in detail about the trophy because it basically boils down to you doing all the missions as efficiently as possible, which is a pretty common theme throughout this video now that I think about it. And I can't really go into detail on every mission because that'd be a spoiler, so yeah. The reason why this trophy is higher than even something like the Foxhound rank from MGS3 though, is because Peace Walker asks way more of the player overall. To be ready for a lot of these missions, it requires a lot of preparation and strategy, and the bosses especially demonstrate this. Trying to beat the bosses fast depends entirely on how much firepower you have, which relies entirely on your R&D level at Mother Base. Okay, now moving on from Peace Walker though, number 3 through number 1 are basically interchangeable, but one of them had to be atop of the other because I can't cheat and put them all at number 1. So yeah. The number 3 trophy on this list though is virtually impossible from the HD collection version of Metal Gear Solid 2. It's very subjective which one's harder, and it depends on your strengths as a player. This trophy asks you to complete all of the VR missions in the game, and these VR missions range from baby shit easy to hard as shit. There are dozens and dozens of each type of mission, which include things like sneaking, eliminations, holdups, bomb disposal, and weapon missions. There are also several unique ones with gimmicks such as boss rushes and sneaking past a Godzilla soldier, because we all know Kojima's fascination with movies. I remember when I was going for this trophy, I was playing for days upon days, and those days quickly turned to weeks. It was hard as hell, and I had to look up several guides on how to do certain missions. The hardest missions are definitely the MGS1 Snake missions, which makes sense because he's the last one you unlock. He has the hardest versions of each type of mission, especially the hold-up ones. The hold-up ones give you an AR, so guess what? You have to rely on the PS3 controller's pressure-sensitive buttons, and these things are ass. There's probably ways to circumvent this, but either way, it's just a pain to get every single one of the 511 VR missions in the game done. And that's why it's at the very minimum number 3 on this list. Now, which trophy is in contention with the behemoth of 511 VR missions in MGS2? Well, ironically, it ended up being the Big Boss trophy in the Master Collection version of Metal Gear Solid 2. And yes, there are 2 trophies named Big Boss on this list because Konami is very original. It's pretty ironic though that a trophy from Metal Gear Solid 2 is the one in contention with another trophy from Metal Gear Solid 2. Like I said, number 3 through 1 are pretty interchangeable. This just came out on top for me over number 3 because it's the hardest top rank in the series. The Big Boss rank in MGS2 has the most restrictions out of all the games, requiring beating the game on the tanker plant scenario on extreme or higher in under 3 hours, getting 0 kills, 3 or less alerts, 0 continues, no caution states, 8 or fewer saves, less than 700 shots fired, no rations, no special items, and no radar. Metal Gear Solid 2 is already harder than most of, if not all, the other games in the series, and with all of these even more difficult and strict restrictions, I mean, it's not even close in terms of difficulty in comparison to the other games at this point. Every single boss in the game on Extreme is pretty troublesome, and the save restriction means you have to think very carefully when you decide to use one. It's very easy to mess up on a boss and get one shot. I mean shit, even the very first boss of the game in the tanker can kill you in one hit. So you essentially have to save before or after a boss, which means you have to go a significant amount of time without a save. And if you mess up any of the requirements along the way, then you're screwed and have to reload a save. I don't think it can be properly conveyed how stressful and difficult this actually is unless you try it for yourself. I mean, just hearing the requirements sound bad enough, but I promise it's actually worse than it sounds. Now you're probably wondering at this point what could possibly be harder than getting the highest rank in the hardest game. Well, you might be forgetting a little gem in the series called Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. The number 1 hardest trophy on this list is the Stormbringer trophy in Metal Gear Rising. This is also interchangeable with the number 2 and 3 spots, as I've said over and over again, but this trophy is hard as hell no matter how you try to spin it. This trophy asks you to complete story mode on Revengeance difficulty with all S rankings. Now I know what you might be thinking. Wasn't Peace Walker basically the same thing? And to that I say yes and no. You see, in Revengeance you can choose each chapter individually, but you cannot get the S ranks in separate playthroughs of the chapter. And every fight in a single playthrough you need to achieve an S rank. This in itself doesn't sound too bad. Well, I mean, it still sounds pretty hard, but here's the actual problem. In Rising, there are fights you have to go way out of your way to find. Even though the game is way more action-based, you can skip fights or miss them entirely, and they put some fights in the most obscure areas ever. Like, there's one fight that only triggers after a very important cutscene, and this cutscene tells you to move forward toward a boss fight. Well, instead of doing that, you have to backtrack to like 2 rooms you just came from for the fight to spawn. You are never going to find shit like that naturally unless someone tells you or you drone around forever finding it. Now for the actual S ranks themselves, you need to get about 5,000 points on average from every fight, and this can be obtained in a few different ways. Not taking damage helps a lot, but you can also get no kill bonuses if you use the wooden sword. Other than those two things, you get points for having a high combo counter, performing Zandatsu attacks, and beating the fight very fast. Each fight individually ranges in difficulty, but Revengeance difficulty adds a lot more difficult enemies to fight, so in general it's not going to be easy. Of course it wouldn't be, because it's the hardest trophy on the list. Good lucky. Now there actually is a saving grace of this trophy, thankfully, and that's the fact you can use special items and still achieve the S ranks. You can use the infinite wigs to get infinite ammo for sub-weapons, infinite fuel for the blade and ripper modes, and a wig that lets you dismember any enemy besides bosses. You can only equip one at a time, but you can change which wig you have in the middle of the chapter, so it isn't that big of a deal actually. Now let me tell you, these fucking wigs are a lifesaver. I can't imagine trying to do this without the wigs. I think the main thing about this trophy that makes it a little more forgiving than MGS2 besides the allowance of special items is the fact that Rising is just a shorter game in general. So at the very least you aren't going to take as long, and you can also abuse the checkpoint system to redo fights. And to be honest, I'm kind of convincing myself mid-sentence that while I was writing this, I put Big Boss rank too low, but honestly I'm too committed at this point, so I'm sticking with it. Like I said, there's a really good discussion and debate possible for the top 3 trophies of this list, so I would like to hear what you have to say about them in the list in general. But honestly, with Metal Gear Rising covered, I think that about wraps up the list. You might notice Metal Gear Survive is missing, and that's because that game sucks ass and I don't want to talk about it. As I just said though, I would love to hear your thoughts on the list and whether you agree or disagree, so feel free to drop some feedback below. It would also help a lot if you could drop a like and subscribe. It would help the channel out a lot, and I'll love you forever. With that being said, it's been your boy Yandere Gogeta, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace out and have a great day.